Hello and welcome back to the vlog. Today we have a very fun and splashy 5100 live stream for you folks. Stakes are around 1-3, but with the straddle we'll get up to a 2-5 game. I am in for $2,500, good for 50,000 pesos, and let's get straight into the action. Our first interesting hand of note comes when +1 opens it up to 300. Hijack calls and we flat the queen 10 off in the cutoff. Big blind comes along, we go 4 ways to this flop, which comes out nice. It's queen 8-7 rainbow. The original raiser now puts in a very small c-bet. The hijack calls and now it's on us. Facing this size, we decide to bump it up here. Interestingly enough now, the big blind now comes along as well as the original raiser. So now I'm not feeling too great about my hand. The turn comes down and it's a huge brick, the deuce of diamonds. Action checks to me. I don't see too much sense in betting here, so I'm just going to check this back and try to get to showdown. River is really good though. It's a deuce of clubs counterfeiting 8-7. However, when the original raiser bets 5,000, I just don't see this ever being a bluff, so I make a pretty quick fold here. In our second interesting hand of note, we have +1 open and it folds to me all the way in the big blind, and I look down at pocket nines. Good enough for a re-raise, so I bump it up to 1,200 and my opponent makes the call. Flop comes down very good for pocket nines. It's 6-3 deuce rainbow. I think on this board, especially with a hand like nines, we want to go for a very large bet against the under the gun range, so I fire out 3,000 into 2,500. There are just so few turns we can continue betting for value, and we do get a good amount of money in versus ace high, pocket pairs, some 7-6 suited, ace-6 suited type hands, so I like my bet here, which my opponent decides to call. The turn is the 7 of hearts. It does improve hands like 6-7 suited and pocket sevens, but I think overall it's a good enough card to continue barreling on, so I fire out 7,000 once again, and my opponent continues. We head to the river. This pot is ballooned up to 22,000, and it's a very clean one, the 10 of clubs. I think we can still go for value here. He still has some one pair type holdings, 6-5 suited, ace-6 suited, pocket eights, those kinds of hands. So I fire out one last value bet into the middle, this time for 18,000, and we put our opponent deep into the tank. I can tell he really wants to call here. I'm just hoping he doesn't have pocket jacks the way this is played, but I think overall we are ahead of a lot of his hands, so I'd like this thin value bet. And he goes ahead and uses up 2 of his time banks, and as the countdown begins, he finally decides to fold. It's a nice pickup there for us, going for some very thin value there on the river. We have a limp, a raise to 400, and I go for the 3-bet up to 1,400, but accidentally misclick and put in 2,400. Folds back around to my opponent who raised, and he announces all in, and the price is unfortunately too good. We have to call. The only hand we don't have odds to call is aces, so anyways, my opponent has ace-king. And that silly misclick cost me an extra 6,500. Yeah. The very next hand, the same player opens it up to 500, and I back-to-back misclick and make it 1,300. I meant to make it 1,800. The mistakes are compounding. The same opponent once again jams it all in for 16k, which 8,000 of that is mine. So we obviously call it off, and we're in a world of trouble as my opponent has kings. That is so brutal. The flop is no help. The turn is the ace of diamonds. River is clean, and we managed to get a good return on our loan there. No time to waste. We are back-to-back hands, this time opening up the king 8 offsuit in the hijack. We get the cutoff, small blind, and big blind to come along, and the flop comes down ace 9-7 rainbow. I see no sense to bet here, so I just check it back, and the turn gives us the open ender with the 6 of hearts. Big blind now bets out 800 into around 1,200. I make the call with my open ender, and we go to the beautiful 5 of clubs river, improving us to a straight. My opponent fires out a very quick bet of 2,200, and I think for a bit and wonder if there's any value to raising here. He bet out super quick, so I feel like he has a little bit of something here. On these 4 to a straight boards, I do like to go for some very small raises with my value and my bluff. So I'm just going to go for it. That's what I do. I go for the min raise up to 4,400, and my opponent snaps it off. And we managed to pick up some extra value versus my opponent's set. So pretty good result there. In this next hand, we pick up the ace-queen suited in middle position and 3-bet the +1 player up to 1,400. Only the original raiser continues, and we go to a flop of ace-queen 5 rainbow. Beautiful board for us to c-bet on. We put in a standard 1/3 bet of 1k, and my opponent calls. Turn is the 5 of spades. A little bit of cause for concern as this player can definitely have some 5x in his range, but our hand is just too strong here. So I continue betting, and I don't want to go too big as I just have the board extremely locked up right now. So I go for 3,500 into the middle. My opponent gives it some thought, and once again calls. Very good news. The river is the 8 of diamonds, and my opponent once again checks it over to me. And normally I just go for something like an 8k or so bet here, blocking so much of my opponent's continue range. But me and this player have some dynamic. I played with him before the stream started, and I had overbet bluff jam twice in the 30 minutes we played. And I think it's very clear my opponent has an ace here and can hero call us. So I go for something a bit unorthodox here, and I just jam all in. It's about 3x the pot. But I just don't think he ever folds an ace here, so I do really like this play, and we send our opponent deep into the tank. It's also a board where if he has an ace, he's chopping with almost any other ace, so he could level himself into thinking I'm trying to blow him off a chop. But after a short think, he decides to pay it off, and we manage to scoop a $76,000 pot, putting us up to 120k in our stack. We continue the madness in the very next hand. Opening up the ace-7 suited in +2, we get 4 callers, so we're going 5 ways to this flop of ace-6 deuce rainbow. Pretty good start, but this multi-way we are either way ahead or way behind, so I choose not to bloat the pot when it's checked to me. I just check it over, and now the hijack puts in a bet of 800. Cutoff calls, and we call as well. Turn. It's the king of diamonds. We check it over once again, and hijack continues firing for a very small size of 1575, around 1/3 pot. And I already want to fold. This is just never a bluff betting to 2 players again. And even if it is, it's a bluff with significant amounts of equity. But for this price, I'm going to peel one last card and hope to get to showdown, so I toss in the call. River is the queen of hearts. We check it over again, and my opponent puts in another bet, and it's tiny again, only 2,025, way less than 1/3, but honestly, I just want to fold the turn, and I just don't see this ever being a bluff. Maybe once in a blue moon, but this is just such an underbluffed line, this multi-way, so I just go ahead and make the fold. My opponent gets a really nice bluff through there with the 7-6. In this next hand, we put up the double straddle up to 400 and look down at king deuce suited facing a raise from early position. Good enough to defend, so we toss in the chips and we head to a flop of jack, 5, deuce, 2 clubs, and a spade. My opponent continues here for 1k, and I decide to raise it up right away. Our hand needs a lot of protection. There are a ton of draws to get value from and overcards, so I just decide to bump it up to 3,300 right away. My opponent continues. We go to the turn. It is the jack of hearts. It's a pretty neutral card. It's going to hit us both pretty hard, but I do think that betting a deuce here is going to be getting a little bit too thin, so I just decide to check it over. And after a bit of a tank, I'm very happy to see my opponent check behind. The river is the 8 of clubs, completing the front door flush draw. I check it over once again, just trying to get to showdown. And my opponent is thinking it over. And as his time is running down, decides on a 6k bet here, and now it's back on us. Already pretty sticky spot. This size just doesn't seem like a flush to me. But I also thought that he would bet his flush draws on the turn. I also think his trips would be betting on the turn as well, which leaves over pairs, which I think is a very reasonable way to play them. But after thinking about it more and more, I just think that this player would be the type to go for the small blocked bet on the turn with a pocket pair. They're happy to bet something like kings or, I don't know, nines for a small size on the turn so they can check back river. But I put in a time bank, we give it a little bit more thought, and in the end, I think it's a pretty close spot. But I end up leaning slightly towards call. I just think he's got something like an ace-high float that is now going for the river bluff, maybe the ace of clubs, something like that. So I decide to go for the hero call, and we are good against the 5-4. I'm very surprised to see him not bet the turn there. But anyways, really nice 20k pot coming our way. It's been nearly an hour, and we have not been in the mix. So I open up the 7 deuce off, which is probably going to be near the bottom of my early position open range. And we do go ahead and get 3 callers, so we want to flop 4 ways, and it comes down 7-4 deuce. We flop 2 pair. What a day this is. We kick things off with a small 1/3 bet, and we immediately get raised by the cutoff up to 1.2k. Easy call here. I see no sense in 3 betting, so We toss in the chips, and we head to a pretty bad turn. It's a 10 of spades completing the flush. We do still have the deuce of spades as backup, so I check it over to my opponent, and we face a ridiculous bet of 8,000 into 3650. This is over 2x pot on a flush completer. So this, in my opinion, completely removes flushes from his range, but we also block so many sets. But I also think given this line, our opponent just has to have it. I just think he's just got sets here and that's it. So I think we just have to fold here, you know, and just pray that he's not overplaying 4-deuce suited. Just pray. But anyways, we make the fold and he does show us the deuce of clubs. And I'm not gonna lie, that hand kind of haunted me until I just saw the results now. So very happy that we could find the fold there and avoid a pretty big disaster. We have a few limps, a raise to 500 from the hijack, and I decide to flatten the button here with the 5-4 suited before the original limper puts in the dreaded limp re-raise up to 2,500. Folds back to me, and I'm not going anywhere with a suited connector, so I toss in the call, and we take a heads-up flop, which comes down beautiful for our hand. It's king 3 deuce with 2 diamonds. We have the open ender as well as the flush draw. My opponent now checks it over to me, which I just find extremely suspicious. But we also have 5 high. I can easily call a raise. So I'm going to go for a bet here, and I put in a small $1,500 bet. My opponent decides to continue with a call, and the turn is a 7 of clubs. My opponent checks once again, and I'm just super suspicious at this point. I feel like I'm being trapped. I feel like he's got aces or kings here. So I just decide to check it back and try to realize my equity. The river is the 10 of clubs. We don't improve, and my opponent now starts reaching for chips, and obviously nothing we can do here. We just toss our cards in the muck, and once again, manage to avoid disaster. We look down at pocket fives, facing a raise and a call, and we put in the 500 additional dollars with the pocket fives on the button, and we take a 3-way flop, which comes down once again, beautiful 8-5 deuce rainbow middle set. Here we go. Georgie fires out a bet of 1,200. This is a very big bet, 3 ways, but I decide to just go for the call here. I want to trap in position. It feels like he's got quite a decent hand, but I think that he is the type that could fold an overpair if I start putting in too much pressure. But this also invites the +1 in as well. So we go 3 ways to the turn, and it is the queen of diamonds. Action now checks to me. I don't want to go too big here, so I just put in a small bet here. I make it 2,000, and once again, both my opponents call. River is the clean 3 of hearts, and now the original raiser goes for a lead of 5,000. I don't really know what to make of this. It feels like a weirdly played overpair, maybe some ace-queen type hand getting fancy. I'm not quite sure. What I do know is I have a set, and I'm going to raise it up. I want to put Georgie all in here, but not go too crazy, as Hope and Pray does have, 660 big blinds behind. So I go for the raise up to 18,000. Hope and Pray gets out the way, and my opponent calls it off. And unfortunately, we cannot avoid disaster 3 times in a row, and we are going to lose that 40k pot to put us under 100,000 in our stack. And with that, we end the massacre, up just over 50,000, roughly 500 big blinds after 4 hours, and a very, very fun night. Big shout out to Masters Poker Club. Hit them up on their Instagram if you're ever in Manila and want to play on their Thursday live stream. And if you want to play with me, the link is in the description. We are running some very big tournaments. I just played a 330 buy-in, had a very deep run. It was a lot of fun. The skill level is similar to live poker, so there is definitely some value to be had. So jump on in. It's a lot of fun. And we're running a $250 main event soon with, I think, don't quote me on this, but I think we're going to have a 7-figure guarantee for that. So come play with me. Link is in the description, and I will see you guys all once again next week.